Today I'm going to talk about my new freshly published book, just out from the lovely people at Pen and Sword Books, and that is A Dark History of Whisky. I want to talk you through a little bit about this book, but I'm also going to do a whisky review for you, and that is a blended whisky. It's not a blended Scotch whisky, mind, because it's not made up entirely of whiskies that have come from Scotland. It's actually a blended malt whisky, but it contains malts, and this is the good thing about Bankhall, because what I like about Bankhall is they're fully transparent with what whiskies are used to make up this blend. So this is a blended British whisky rather than a blended Scotch whisky, and it's made up of whiskies from Edinburgh's Bonington Distillery, Liverpool's Bankhall, and Wales's Aberfalls. So with the exception of a little Irish, this covers all of the home counties. Now I'm going to give this a taste. I'm going to pour measure out here a moment. It's also what I should mention here, because this is not an expensive whiskey, 70cl bottle here. I think I paid about £22 for that. It's bottled at 40%, as would be expected, but they've taken great care in the bottle design. It looks rather premium. We've got some wording embossed into the glass. Artisanal whiskey and spirits. It's a blended British blended whiskey, comes in, as I said, at 40%, but they have really taken care with the packaging, with the bottling here, and unlike many whiskies in this price range, it hasn't got a cheap old screw cap, it's got a real cork. So let me just pour a glass of that a minute, and we'll talk about my book, A Dark History of Whisky. When I approached my publishers, Pen and Sword Books, about doing a whisky book, I had something totally different in mind than what the eventual book would turn out to be. I've written several books for them. I've written history books on both the First and the Second World War. I've done a couple of true crime books, Dark Valleys and The Date with the Hangman. But with A Dark History of Whisky, I originally approached a publisher with an idea for writing a whisky book, which more or less went along the lines of countless other whisky books that are out there. In other words, it would have distillery histories, tasting notes of whatever whiskies were currently available, readily available, both single malts, Irish whiskies, blended Scotch whiskies, bourbon, Japanese whiskies, Indian whiskies, all kinds of whiskies. And the publisher came back to me and said, whilst they're interested in a whisky book, they don't want something run-of-the-mill. And they'd recently published a book called A Dark History of Gin. And they wondered if I wanted to write a whisky book along the same lines, A Dark History of Whisky, whisky noir, if you like. And at first I was a little flummoxed by that. Let's take a little bit of the nose of this Bankhall. On the nose it gives out hints of cereal. Now, I don't believe there are any grains used in this blended whisky at all, although it doesn't specifically say that it's a blended malt whisky. So there could be grain whisky in here, but it just bills itself as a blended British whisky, although it is quite transparent about the fact it contains whiskies from Aberfalls, which is a Welsh distillery, Bankhall, which is a Liverpudlian distillery, a Scouser distillery, and of course Bonington's, which is a Scottish distillery. So there could be some grain in here, but I'm not sure about that. I'm getting some cereal on the nose, and maybe a few fruity notes. Put that one aside a moment, and we'll come back to it in a moment. It's a refreshing amber golden colour, almost treacly, like a light treacle. And it seems to have some half-decent legs. I can see the rivulets there, slowly meandering down the glass. Back to A Dark History of Whisky. So A Dark History of Whisky, as I say, it's unlike any other whisky book that is in the shops at the moment, as far as I'm aware. It retails for full price of £25. That is the hardcover edition. There is going to be a paperback edition, which will be a little cheaper now. I believe that comes out in a couple of weeks. And there will also be an ebook version, though that's not due out for a couple of months. It's an handsomely produced book, and it takes in the entire story of whiskey with an emphasis on the darker side, whiskey noir, if you like. I'm just going to read you a little bit here from the introduction to the book, which it's called "Is It Whiskey or Whiskey?" By that, I'm spelling it two different ways. So, is it whiskey, K-Y, or is it whiskey, E-Y? So I'm just going to read you a little bit about that. Is it whiskey or whiskey? Confusingly, it is both, and there is no real definitional difference between whiskey or whiskey. They're both whiskey with or without the E. It all comes from the way the word whiskey or whiskey has evolved over the centuries and stems from the original Gaelic form of the word. But alas, even that is confusing. In Irish Gaelic, the word whiskey evolved from the phrase Usci Britha, which means the water of life. But in Scotch Gaelic, a language with great similarities to the Irish, the phrase is spelled Usci Babitha, which also means water of life. And you may have to accept my apology there for some of the pronunciations there. So where was I? It's spelled Uskiba, which also means water of life. Both mean the same, and yet the spellings are different. It is widely believed that the word whiskey or whiskey is a corruption of the original Gaelic, and that the phrase has been progressively anglicised to usky and then iski until it came to be whiskey or whiskey. It's all down to phonetics. And the word usky, uskans is pronounced usky, and so, drunkenly, it becomes whiskey, or wait for it, whiskey. Simple enough on the face of it, but yet if one delves a little further into the subject, further confusion is added. For instance, in 1785, no less a personage than Robert Burns in his piece Earnest Cry and Prayer dropped the original Gaelic and instead used the Latin phrase for the water of life, and it became aqua vitae. Tell them who hath the chief direction, Scotland and me's in great affliction, in sin they lay that cursed restriction on aqua vitae. In fact, the first written reference to aqua vitae comes when in 1494 King James sent instructions to Friar John Core to make aqua vitae, all being an archaic measurement that equals 24 pecks. It doesn't help, of course, that the word peck is now archaic in itself. However, it basically equates to 2 gallons of dry goods, usually of foodstuff. What is certain is that the year before his boozy request, King James of Scotland was campaigning against the Lords of the Isles on the west coast of Scotland, and that he first encountered aqua vitae there, where it will have been known as Uskabar. So that's basically the introduction. There's a lot more to it than that, and it looks at the way that different distilleries in different regions, different geographical regions will either use the E or not the E. It tells you, of course, at the end, towards the end of this section, it says, so there we have it. Only we're no closer to understanding why whiskey or whiskey is spelled 2 different ways. Perhaps an easier way to address the problem is that to accept that in Scotland, Canada and Japan it is whiskey without the E, whilst in Ireland, America, and mostly but not everywhere else it is whiskey. Only it isn't, and certain American brands such as Maker's Mark perversely use the Scotch spelling of whiskey without the E. Sometimes it seems a free-for-all regarding the spelling. Throughout this book I will use both spellings. If a certain brand uses the E, then I will use E, and if it doesn't, then I won't. To E or not to E, indeed. And that's basically the introduction. Chapter 1 covers distillation and the birth of modern whiskey. There are some lovely illustrations here throughout the book, many which were provided by various distilleries. So we have to thank the Cotswolds Distillery here for this wonderful image. But there are many images in the book. From the Pierce Lyons Distillery there, we see some stills. It also goes through and takes in a lot of the quirky stories surrounding whiskey. I'm just going to skip through here at random now. And as you can see here is the story of Curtis Gilbert Kurtzinger, who was the subject for the hugely successful Netflix documentary that looked at the great Pappy Van Winkle bourbon heist. Everything's in this book, it's all contained in there. As I say, you can get a copy now. Its full retail price is £25, but the publisher's Pen and Sword books, simply search for a Dark History of Whiskey Pen and Swords book online. You'll find it. The publishers are doing some good offers on this handsome new hardcover at the moment. Amazon also has the book, Waterstones has the book. It's pretty much available anywhere books are sold. You can also ask for a copy in your local library. So that's The Dark History of Whiskey by Gary Dobbs. Now let's go back to this Bankhall blended, British blended whiskey and give it a taste. I'm getting cereal, as I say. Maybe some fruit, but dark fruit, raisins. There's a no age, it's a no age statement, so I mean the oldest it can be is 3-year-old. We know it's got to be 3-year-old. It's very warm, and as it goes down, the finish in the mouth is oats. I do get a little bit of cereal grain. Or maybe some strawberries. Give it another taste. Yeah, fruity, strawberry, maybe raisins, darker fruits, raisins, some grain, it is cereal grain especially. I'm going to add a little water to this and see what it does to it, so one moment. Now I picked up this Bankhall in my local Morrison supermarket, and there were several different Bankhall's. There's also a Bankhall's single malt which I haven't tried yet, and I believe that one comes exclusively from Aberfalls. Here is the Bankhall's single malt, labelled as a British single malt whiskey. And the back of the bottle here, as I say, this company are totally transparent with what's in the bottles, and I really do appreciate that, because you buy most blended whiskies, in fact 99.9% of the blended whiskies, maybe 99.9% of blended whiskies don't tell you what whiskies they contain, and it's some guesswork. The malt is a little lighter in colour than the blended whiskey, but on the back it tells us that this amber gold whiskey, finished in bourbon barrels, has aromas of vanilla and toffee, candy, citrus fruit, fig and sultana. On the palate, experience dried fruit, creamy nuts, malt and dark chocolate, sourced from the Aberfalls distillery. So we know that this single malt here, the Bankhall's single malt, is actually from Aberfalls, so it's nice that they let us know. Now, if I look at the back of the British blended whiskey, which is the one we're tasting at the moment, I've added some water and given it a moment to do its thing. Now right away with the water it's become more complex, it's opened up. It was smooth anyway, but it's very, there's a consistency to it, it's almost chewy. On the back of the bottle, this tells us that a blend of English, Scottish and Welsh whiskies, matured in first fill bourbon and American virgin oak barrels, spiced rye notes with a sweet vanilla taste. Enjoy when sipped or mixed with cola or ginger. Now, I prefer my whiskey not mixed. I will in the summer I have a whiskey with ginger beer in the form of a Kentucky Mule. Only I kind of bastardize the Kentucky Mule, because the Kentucky Mule is of course bourbon and ginger beer and a little lime and a little lemon, but I make Kentucky Mules with Scotch whiskey, so it becomes a Scotch Mule. Now I do like that on the summer, but generally throughout the year I'll take my whiskey over the rocks, over ice, and when I'm doing initial tastings, I do take it perfectly neat. Then I add a little water, which is what I've done at this moment, but I don't look away in horror like some whiskey snobs do when it recommends on a bottle using it as a mix and mixing it with Coke or ginger beer or whatever, because you pay for your whiskey, you should drink it the way you want to. But let's give this another taste now. Now, as I said, the label promises me vanilla, sweet vanilla and spicy rye notes. The rye, maybe that's the grain I was getting. But to me, I can't detect anything vanilla-y or along that spectrum at all. I'm getting fruit. I'm getting a juicy kind of strawberry fruit, but also some darker fruits, raisins and so forth. It's got a nice thick consistency in the mouth, and I don't know how well the camera picks up the legs, but it's got fantastic legs. It really is a decent whiskey, and for 20 something pounds, you can't go wrong. And top marks to Bankhall for being so transparent on what's contained within their whiskies, and also top marks for presentation. The presentation of the bottle, a real cork rather than a cheap screw top. You know, this could compete with any of the more expensive single malts we find out there in the shops. It's a lovely design bottle. Bankhall embossed at the side here. It also has a lot of embossing on the front. It's a wonderful bottle. You don't judge a book by the cover, of course, unless it's Dark History of Whiskey, because this has got a pretty cool cover. But you don't judge a book by the cover, or so the saying goes. But still, it is nice when something looks premium and you're not paying a premium price for it. It's a decent whiskey. And of course, it's a rarity, especially in the United Kingdom, where most blended whiskies is blended Scotch. So having a blended British whiskey is something of a nice change. And it's nice also here that we're drinking within this blend whiskies from 3 different nationalities: Welsh, English and Scottish, because the English are making some great whiskies at the moment, and the Cotswold distillery produces some great stuff. I've never tasted anything from Liverpool's Bankhall before until I got this this blended whiskey here. But you know, it's great to sort of broaden your palate, to not close yourself off to different whiskey styles. So what's the difference between this and blended Scotch? Well, little. It is along the style of a blended Scotch whiskey, but of course it can't be called blended Scotch because it contains whiskies that originate in countries other than Scotland. There is a lot of Scotch whiskey in here with the Edinburgh Bonnyton's distillery, but of course Aberfoyle's and Bankhall disqualify this from calling itself Scotch by the strict rules of Scotch, but it's still a decent whiskey. I don't, as I say, I don't get the vanilla that's promised on the bottle here, on the labelling, but then I think we all experience different tastes from our whiskey. There is no one taste that's guaranteed to be provided by a whiskey. What I will say is this is a decent whiskey. It's no age statement, so it's on the youthful side. It's pretty decent. You know, I would put it alongside any of the whiskies in this price range, any of the blended Scotches in this price range, stuff like Famous Grouse or Bell's, Grant's even, you know, it can stand proudly alongside those, so that's all it has to do. And if you want to have a good read while you're drinking your whiskey, then please check out my book, A Dark History of Whiskey. It's out there now, it's available now, so cheers. Solange, enjoy.